A while ago, I recorded a video on Kamal and how you can deploy Laravel applications with it. Since then, a lot of things changed in Kamal, including the name. Back then it was called MERS, but now it was renamed to Kamal. Yeah, it got a few new things. I thought it was time to record a new version of that video for Kamal version 2. And this is it. So, in case you didn't know, Kamal is a tool on top of Docker. It builds a bunch of workflows that allows you to deploy web applications anywhere, from bare metal to cloud VMs. It was built by the 37 Signals folks on the migration from the cloud to their own servers. And it was made open source, so we all can use that, which is really good. The application that we are going to build is this one. I use the Hotwire Starter Kit, so check that out if you haven't. And I just built some simple LLM interactions over here. And I'm using Prism, which is a PHP package for interacting with large language models. And there's a bunch of providers over here. You can use whatever provider you want, like Anthropic or DeepSeek or Mistral. I'm using Ollama over here because I want to run it locally, and we are also going to deploy Ollama in this example. So, and by the way, this is no means an example of how you can deploy Ollama applications or anything like that. It's just an example. Yeah, so I can start a new chat over here. Tell me something about Laravel, and it should stream back to me the response. This is actually using Ollama and the Gemma 3 family of models. I could use any other family of models, but the Gemma 3 has some quantized models, which makes it easier for us to run both locally and on the server. I'm using the 1 billion token, so this is a dummy kind of model. Locally, I could probably run the 27 billion token, but on the server, I'm gonna run the 1 billion token. So that's what we are using over here. And yeah, so I'm not running this application locally on Docker or anything, but the Hotwire Starter Kit comes with an example Docker file that, every application using the Hotwire Starter Kit already comes with the Docker file example. And this is what we are going to use. This Docker file uses the server-side up PHP images. There's a set of images that we can choose over here, but we are using the FPM Nginx one because this is the most common way of running PHP, so we are going to use that. The images have a bunch of workflows and automations for Laravel, specifically for Laravel, like running the migrations automatically when the container starts, when it boots, and we are going to use that. And there's also like examples on how you can use the Laravel's task scheduler with Docker, the queue, or if you're using Horizon, which I'm not in this case, but I'm gonna use queues. There's also Reverb, an example of how to use Reverb. This is all like if we were using traffic, but Kamal V2, it's not actually using traffic anymore. It's using its own proxy, but we're going to be able to use Reverb just the same. And in this example, I'm actually going to create a new droplet on DigitalOcean. That's where we're gonna host our application. New York's fine. AMD over here. I'm gonna choose the cheapest one, the $7 a month. But later we'll have to upgrade it to the $28 a month, because that's for when we deploy Ollama. We could probably go with a 2 gigs of RAM, and maybe 2 CPUs. Yeah, but we're gonna need some RAM. But for now, this will do. I'm gonna name it Turbo Kamal Demo 01. While that's doing its thing, we are gonna also need a registry. We are going to use Docker Hub over here. So the way Kamal works is it will build the image and push to a registry, and then it will SSH on the servers and pull the image that it just built from the registry. The Docker Hub registry allows us to create one private image for free. So that's what I'm going to use. And I'm going to call Turbo Kamal Demo. That should be enough. So the server should be done by now. And I'm going to copy the IP address. And I'm going to my Cloudflare account, and I'm going to point 2 domains to this application. I want the application to be available under the chat.turbolaravel.com, and the Reverb server will be on reverb.turbolaravel.com. So that's what I'm going to bind to the server. And remember to untoggle the proxy status, the proxy DNS from Cloudflare, if you're using Cloudflare. We don't want that yet. Now that that's done, let's go back to Kamal, to the documentation over here, and just install it. you need Ruby to install Kamal. You can run Kamal on a container. It ships with its own container, but there are some limitations on what you can do, like fetching secrets won't work because depending on what kind of secrets you're using and, you know, agent forwarding and SSH and all that. I think it's best to just install Ruby and install Kamal as a gem. So let's do that. In this case, I actually have it already installed in my system, but you can just, once you install Ruby, you can just install Kamal with gem install Kamal, and that should be globally available. This is not installing for this application, it's installing the gem globally. Now I can run Kamal, and I have a bunch of commands. The first command that we need to run is Kamal init. That will create the config deploy file and a .kamal folder. And that folder will have our secrets, our Kamal secrets, and the hooks. We're not going to cover hooks for now, just focus on deploy and secrets. Let me go over this image over here, this Docker file real quick. So there are 3 stages. I'm using multi-stage for the Hotwire starter kit example. The Hotwire starter kit doesn't depend on Node, so we only need PHP. So that's what we are doing over here. We have 3 stages. The base one, if we had any custom extensions or anything like that, this is where we could install it. And we also have the build stage, which is where we are gonna optimize our assets. In this case, I'm downloading the Tailwind CSS CLI, and I'm building the Tailwind CSS styles. And I'm also running import map optimize, which should move my JavaScript to the public folder and add the digests to the file URLs. This is just so the browser can cache it aggressively. And then we have the 3rd stage, which is the final one. So in this stage is where we copy our files from the build stage to the correct location, changing the ownership, and then we switch the user to ensure that the user is data, because at some point you might overwrite the user to root if you want to install extensions and stuff like that. So it's just, you know, you don't want your image to run as root. This is also where we are enabling OP cache, and we are also telling the container that it should run migrations. So that's it. There's nothing fancy over here. Let's check out the deploy file. So this is where we're going to spend most of the time in this video. We are going to set the name of our application. In this case, it's Turbo Kamal Demo. This is the image name, where the image, how we're going to call the image. This case should be my registry and then Turbo Kamal Demo. And this is where we put the IP of our server. So I'm going to go to DigitalOcean and copy that IP. And before we do anything, I need to be able to connect the server as root. So I need to run it at least once. So the server is added to my known host, and you know, from now on, it just connects automatically. So Kamal needs this step to be done before you can actually use it. Web applications, they might have many entry points. By that, I mean, the same application can serve multiple roles. So we have the web role, but we also have a clock, so the task scheduler in Laravel. We also have a queue worker. We also have Reverb, which is another process, right? So for that, Kamal uses the concept of roles. We're going to use that, but let's delete it because we are going to add one later. This is where we configure our proxy or the domain. So by default, Kamal only connects the proxy to the web role. The other roles can still use the proxy, so you can map a domain to one of the roles, but you have to enable that per role. In this case, we actually want the proxy, but we don't want SSL for now. And this is going to be called, this application is going to be called chat.turbolaravel.com. And the app container, the app port is 8080. That's the default in the server-side app images, so you can see default configurations over here and see the ports that it's actually using. You can see that it also handles, the server-side images also can handle SSL for us, but we're not going to use that. Instead, we are going to just map the port and let Kamal handle the certificate for us, because it can also do that. Now we have to configure our registry. So this is my registry username, and I also need the password or a personal token, right? But in this case, it's actually coming from the secrets. We're going to cover secrets in a little bit. I'm deploying to the same architecture that I have locally, so this is fine. If you need to deploy to multiple types of architecture, then you can configure Kamal to do a multi-build, multi-architecture build. We are going to need some environment variables, but it's a lot. So I'm going to copy. So this is basic Laravel stuff. So we are configuring the application to the name of the application, the environment, turning off debug mode, and then the domain that we're going to use, the maintenance driver we're going to use, and then how many. Anyways, what's important here is that we are going to use MySQL for the database. And we're also going to set the log channel to standard error. This is common in Dockerized environments. You will either send logs to standard out or standard error. In this case, Laravel comes with a standard error channel, so that's where I'm sending the logs to. We're also setting sessions and queue and cache to the database as well, so that's also going to use MySQL. And over here, we have Reverb, and we're disabling the mailer log and some other configuration over here for Ollama and for Reverb, but we'll touch on that in a little bit. There's also some secrets over here. So for environment variables, we can set them in plain text over here, but it's also common to that environment variables come from secrets. And that's what we're setting over here for the app key, for the Reverb app ID, app key, and app secret, and for the database name, username, and password. These all come from secrets. And over here, we are setting, we are using a convention, an alias over here. So we're saying that in the application, the DB database env comes from the secret called MySQL DB database, MySQL DB user, MySQL DB password. So this is the mapping. It's local and remote. We can also register some aliases, but we're not going to use that here. And we don't actually need to configure anything in the SSH part. We are not going to use mapped volumes over here, but we're going to set some assets over here. So Kamal already handles one edge case of deploying containerized applications, which is what if you're in the middle of deploy and the user gets a request to the new application and the browser will try to download some assets, and that request ends up in one of the old containers, which doesn't actually have the assets. So Kamal already handles that for you. It will copy the files from the container in this path that you configure, and it will add those files to the old container, so both containers have everything that it needs when it's deploying. So that's pretty neat. And in our case, our assets are in www, HTML, public, dist. That's where the TL and CSS, CLI, and the import maps packages move the assets, the final version of the assets. We don't need any boot configuration or anything, but we're going to use MySQL over here. So that's what we're mapping. So I don't actually need to bind any port because all these containers, they will run in the same server. So they can use the network that Kamal creates, which is, if you notice over here, so in DB host, we have the name of the service dash and then the name of the accessory. In our case, it's a DB accessory. So this is the same name as our service name over here. In Kamal, accessories follow a different deployment workflow. So when we are setting up the server, Kamal will start by setting up the accessories that it finds in our definition. So it will do that first, and then it will deploy the application. But on a regular kind of deploy, it won't actually touch on the accessories because we don't have to. We don't have to deploy a new version of the database whenever we do a deployment of the application. So Kamal already handles that and knows that. So in this case, I need some more changes over here, and that's in here. So I'm just configuring some MySQL specific environment variables. So same deal as before, we are mapping this variable, this environment variable inside the container to this one, which is in our secrets. We'll talk about secrets in a little bit. And we don't actually need to map any files to the accessory, to the database. We just need the directory there. That's it. But before we are able to deploy, we need to talk about secrets. So remember that Kamal created a .kamal secrets file. There are many ways to fetch secrets and tell Kamal about our secrets. The first one is reading from the environment variable where we are deploying from, which in this case is my own machine, but I'm not going to use that one. The other example is to read from some kind of commands. So we could build our own commands that resolve the configs for us. But in this case, we're not going to use that either. We're going to use 1Password over here, and Kamal comes already integrated with it. So that's what we're going to use. For this to work, you need the OP CLI tool, which is the 1Password CLI tool installed in your system. I already have it over here, so it's already configured to my 1Password account. Over here in my account name, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to link that information. So I actually have it in my environment variable instead. It should be Kamal Turbo Chat 1Pass. And my vault, I created a vault. I'm going to show you in a second, but I created a vault called Turbo Chat Demo. And the secret name, there's a file, a secret file there with all my passwords in the same secret. And this will be called Turbo LLM app. And over here, we have to list which secrets we want to fetch from this vault, which in our case is a long list. So it will be the app key, the Reverb app ID, Reverb app key, Reverb app secret, and we also need the MySQL DB database and MySQL DB user and MySQL DB password. So this will extract all these secrets into this secrets environment variable, and then we have to map them over here, each one to its own environment variable. So what we have is like app key and app key over here from the secrets. So I'm gonna do the rest over here so you don't see me typing. But yeah, we extract from the secrets from the vault, and then we map them as environment variables. This is what I have over here. I have one vault called Turbo Chat Demo, and in that vault, I have this secret called Turbo LLM app. Inside this secret, I have a bunch of passwords, and this is my Kamal registry token. So I went to the Docker Hub and I generated a new token, and it's in here. So that's what Kamal is going to use. Now we can go back to our deploy file, and just to double check that everything looks fine, and it does. So now we should be able to just set up the application. So the first command that we run when we deploy an application with Kamal is Kamal setup, and we only have to run it once. So Kamal will make sure that we have Docker installed on the server. In this case, it already has it installed because I ran it this before. But now it's actually fetching the secrets. So I'm authorizing it to fetch the secrets from my 1Password account. And it should be able to do that. And now it's actually going to build the image and push to the registry. And it will connect to the server, pull the image from there, and start deploying the containers. So now it looks like it's done. So we should be able to go to our browser, and I'm going to open an incognito tab over here and try to reach the application under HTTP because we don't actually have TLS yet. So yeah, looks like everything's working. So nice. Let's register. And yeah, the application is live, but it's actually not working yet. So if we open the console, you can see that Reverb is not resolving this domain over here is not actually resolving to Reverb. And that's because we're not actually deploying Reverb yet. So let's do that. Over here, we're going to start a new role. We're going to configure a new role for Reverb. So let's copy this one, and we'll start from there, and then we'll call it Reverb. It needs to be a little different because we are also going to configure the command that we're going to use over here. So we're going to say the hosts are these ones because we are also deploying Reverb to the same server. And the command will be PHP. The command will be this one. And now we also have to configure a proxy over here. So Reverb, we also need a domain, right? So we're going to tell it, for now, don't generate an SSL certificate, and instead, and map the reverb.turbolaravel.com to this service, and then the app port will be 8080, because that's also the port that we're mapping the Reverb container, the Reverb process to. That should be it. So we didn't actually change anything in our application, so we can basically run Kamal deploy and then -p. So it will skip building the image, it will just reuse the same image that we have, which should be much faster. So yeah, 45 seconds, not bad. And then if we try to reload it, so reverb.tubelaravel.com, we'll get a 404 probably. But if we check the up route, which is also used for health check on Reverb, it should say it works. So that's cool. We got Reverb and we got the main domain pointing to this application. It's all working. So now I'm pretty sure we can just enable SSL and on both actually. And then we can run maybe a redeploy. Redeploy should be faster than an actual deploy because redeploy skips a few steps like checking if Docker is installed and stuff like that. So in this case, we can just skip it because we're just making a configuration change to the proxy. In this case, actually, it was slower, but usually it's faster. Okay, so now we should be able to change this to HTTPS and see if that works. Looks like it worked, but the browser doesn't actually trust the certificate for some reason. Let's refresh over here and see it actually does the same for Reverb. So I'm going to close this window and I'm going to reopen because that's probably some browser thing, reverb.tubelaravel.com/up. And yeah, we got the certificate was issued. It's all fine. The main application as well has the certificate and it's all fine. So if we log in now, because we lost the cookies, we can see that it actually, if we refresh, there is a socket connection to Reverb and it was actually working. So that's pretty cool. We got Reverb deployed with Kamal. We still cannot use the application yet. I mean, we can change the theme if we want to, like a Dracula theme or Forest theme or Halloween theme or whatever. We can also go to the settings and change the profile and stuff like that. But we cannot, and I'm gonna use the default. But we can't actually use the LLM spot because we don't have Ollama deployed. So let's do that. And okay, so we are going to deploy Ollama as an accessory over here. And just like the MySQL database container, we have an Ollama key over here. And this accessory is going to use the Ollama/Ollama image. And we also need to deploy it. We are deploying to the same host. We could set up a separate host for that, but let's just do this. It's just easier this way. In the previous video I recorded, I went overboard and I deployed multiple machines. In this case, I wanted to keep it simple. And let's just map one volume, one directory over here to /root/Ollama, because that's where our models are going to be stored. So we need to store that in a way that is reusable. That should be it actually. So we should be able to just do accessory boot and the accessory name. In this case is Ollama. So Kamal will SSH into the server and it will set up an Ollama container for us on that server. It looks like it's finished. So we should be able to just run bash inside the Ollama service by running accessory exec and then giving the name of the accessory that we want to run the command on, which is Ollama in this case, and saying it's interactive. And we also need to reuse probably. We got a shell inside the container that's running on our server. So that's pretty cool. We can run Ollama pull and tell it which image we're going to pull. It's going to be this one, and I need a space there. So it should be able to download that pretty quick, and it did. So now we have Ollama installed, and we can try to run the model, but we are gonna run a limitation over here. We only have 100 megs available of RAM, and it needs a gig. But to fix that, we are actually going to have to turn off our VM, and then we are going to upsize it. We could set up a separate droplet for the Ollama accessory and run Ollama on its own machine, and that's probably a good idea if this was a real application. And probably we would not be using Ollama in production, but using VLLM or running LLMs some other way, or probably using some provider like Anthropic or whatever. But in this example, let's just beef it up. And we are going to use the 28, this one, AMD. So 2 CPUs and 4 gigs of RAM. And that should be enough for us. This is not a Kamal thing, by the way. This is just because we are running Ollama, and Ollama is resource intensive. Well, LLMs are resource intensive. Okay, now we can turn on our machine, and Kamal should be able to bring all the containers back up, and we don't have to do anything. It just works. So now we can try the same command that we had before, and we should get a new shell inside the container, which we do. And now we can try running Ollama run and the name of the model, and it should work now. Is this working? And it will get us a response. So it's actually working. So that's pretty cool. So that means that one more thing over here, in our application, we configure the Ollama URL, and that's a Prism thing. So there is a Prism config file over here where we can configure the Ollama URL. And this is just mapping to the same convention that we have for the database accessory. So service name and name of the accessory. In this case, it's Ollama. So with that, we should be able to use Ollama in our application. So let's just reload over here. Let's close that tab and let's try to use it. Tell me something about Laravel. And as you can see, there's something fishy, there's something going on over here. We were supposed to see the streaming response, but we didn't, and it actually waited for the entire response to be created. That's because Kamal by default, we are using HTTP streamings over here. This is not actually using Reverb for the current user. We're using Reverb for all the users connected. So if I had another user over here, for instance, at chat.tubular.com, and I asked it, like, tell me something else about Laravel. So you see the user that actually created is not actually getting the message, but the other user got one of the messages. And that's because we're not actually using queue workers yet. So let's fix that real quick over here. I'm gonna deploy a new role, which is workers, so queue, and this will run queue work price 3. So we don't actually need proxies, but we're gonna need to change one thing over here, which is the health check. So this should be health TMD, and this should be health check queue. So the server-side up images, they have a bunch of scripts that we can use over here to tell if our process is healthy or not. In this case, we are using the queue one, so we can use this health check queue script. With that, we should be able to just come out, redeploy, and -p, because we didn't make any changes to our application. This is just a change of configuration. And that should get us one more process, one more role deployed, which is the queue. If everything works, we should start seeing the message being broadcasted over here. Maybe not to this connection, but to another one, because it's going to reconnect. Oh, we saw it, and that's pretty cool. So the queue worker is already working. So that's awesome. Let's go back over here to the dashboard to create one, and let's delete this one. That solves one issue, which is the broadcasting, but we still have the issue that we had before with the buffering. So Kamal actually buffers the response, the proxy buffers the response, but we don't actually want it to do that. So we just need to tell the proxy to not buffer responses in this case. And we can disable that with this config over here. And with that, we can make another deploy, which is going to make a configuration change to the Kamal proxy. And with that, we should be able to just refresh our application over here and over here as well. And I'm gonna say, let's go to this one and say, tell me something about Laravel. And now we should be able to see the response being streamed. And this is actually using HTTP streams. This is not using anything fancy or server-side events or anything like that. It's just streaming chunks of a turbo string to the client, and we are rendering that over here, just appending to the body. This is a custom thing. It deserves its own video. I'm gonna record that next. But yeah, so the thing is, it's actually broadcasting and doing everything that we need. So, like over here on this, so on the right side, it's going to, like, we are going to ask for another interesting fact about Laravel. It's going to stream it via HTTP streams, but on the left side, it's actually going to use Reverb and queues to broadcast the message to any other user connected to the browser. So tell me something else about Laravel, and it should work. So we should be able to stream it, and the other one is actually receiving via Reverb. So yeah, that's pretty cool. So this worked. So yeah, that's Kamal. That's how you can use Kamal to deploy Laravel applications. I hope I could give you an overview of Kamal and how you can use that with Laravel, but you can deploy any web application with Kamal. So yeah, that's it. I hope you like it. I really like Kamal. I like the simplicity of it, and I hope you enjoyed as well. And yeah, so that's it. I'll see you when I see you. Bye.